The image captures the moment perfectly. An aging king surrounded by a sea of faces, each woman a trophy of conquest, each crown jewel a symbol of compromise. This is Solomon at the height of his power, yet at the depths of his soul. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button, thanks. It began differently. Picture a 20-year-old prince trembling at his father's deathbed. King David, the giant slayer, the psalmist, the warrior who united Israel, whispers his final words. Days later, young Solomon stands before the nation, wearing a crown too heavy for his shoulders. That night, in a dream that would change history, God appears with an offer that sounds almost too good to be true. Ask for anything you want. Most would request invincibility, endless riches, or the destruction of their enemies. Solomon? He asks for wisdom, the ability to distinguish right from wrong, to lead God's people justly. God is so impressed by this selfless request that he grants not only wisdom, but also wealth and honor beyond measure. Solomon wakes up the wisest man alive. Within years, he's an international sensation. 3,000 proverbs, architectural marvels, and a temple so magnificent it takes 150,000 workers 7 years to complete. But here's the mystery. Why did the man who had everything end up with nothing? The crown weighs more than gold and jewels. At 20 years old, Solomon feels it crushing his skull, pressing down on shoulders that have never lifted a sword in battle, never faced a lion in the wilderness, never run from a mad king's javelin. His father did all those things. David, the giant slayer, the warrior poet, the man after God's own heart, is 3 days dead, and Solomon is terrified. He travels to Gibeon in the dark, accompanied only by priests who say nothing. The altar awaits. 1,000 burnt offerings, an extravagant, desperate act of worship. The smoke rises into the night sky, carrying Solomon's silent plea. I am not my father. Help me. That night, in a dream that feels more real than waking, God speaks. Ask what you wish me to give you. A blank check from the creator of the universe. Solomon's mind races through possibilities. Long life, vast armies, the death of every enemy, palaces that shame Egypt. But something in his father's final words echoes. Keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways. Give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, Solomon whispers, to discern between good and evil. Silence. Then warmth floods through him like fire. Because you have asked this, God says, I have given you a wise and discerning heart, so that there has been no one like you before, nor shall one like you arise after. I have also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor, and if you walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and commandments as your father David walked, then I will prolong your days. If. That word hangs in the air like smoke. Solomon wakes gasping. Within weeks, his wisdom becomes legendary. 2 women, 1 baby, his threat to divide the child with a sword. The true mother reveals herself through love. The nation marvels. Foreign dignitaries arrive bearing gold. But in the royal archives, a scribe records something curious. Solomon's first diplomatic correspondence is with Egypt, the same Egypt that enslaved his ancestors. Why would the wisest man alive make that his first move? Solomon sits alone in his study, surrounded by scrolls he's written. 3,000 proverbs. Wisdom that kings travel months to hear. Yet tonight, he writes something different, something that terrifies him. Meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless. The Hebrew word burns in his mind. Hevel, vapor, smoke, breath that disappears the moment you exhale. He's been king for 15 years, and the revelation crushes him. Everything he touches turns to smoke. His stylus moves frantically across the parchment. In much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. The irony is suffocating. God gave him the gift everyone desires, and it's become his curse. He sees too much, understands too deeply, knows that every achievement crumbles, every pleasure fades, every relationship ends in death. He tried pleasure first, the finest wines, the most elaborate feasts, entertainment that cost fortunes. I said of laughter, madness, and of mirth, what does it accomplish? Nothing. Empty. Smoke. So he built gardens that rivaled paradise, pools and aqueducts, buildings that made foreign architects weep with envy. What does a man get for all the toil and anxious striving? All his days his work is grief and pain. The darkness spreads through his writings like poison. I saw under the sun that in the place of justice there is wickedness. But here's what haunts him most. He can diagnose the disease perfectly, but he can't find the cure. His wisdom shows him the problem with crystalline clarity. Nothing under the sun satisfies. Nothing material fills the void. Nothing temporal brings lasting peace. Instead of driving him back to God, this knowledge makes him reckless. If everything is meaningless anyway, why not try everything? If wisdom doesn't satisfy, maybe the answer is more. More experiences, more wives, more gold, more power. Maybe if he accumulates enough, the emptiness will finally fill. A servant enters with news. Your Majesty, the Pharaoh's daughter has arrived for the wedding ceremony. Solomon stares at the scroll in front of him, at the word Hevel still wet with ink. He's about to marry the daughter of Egypt, the nation that enslaved his ancestors. And he genuinely believes he's wise enough to handle it. Solomon's fingers trace the words in the Torah scroll, reading aloud to his council. He must not acquire many horses for himself. He must not take many wives. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. 3 simple commands for Israelite kings. 3 boundaries God established. 3 lines Solomon is about to cross. His chief advisor clears his throat. Your Majesty, the Egyptian envoy awaits your answer. They're offering a trade alliance, horses for our grain. Solomon hesitates. The command is clear. No horses from Egypt. But his advisor leans closer, voice smooth as oil. The law was about not returning to Egypt, not trading with them. This is diplomacy, strategic wisdom. Your father would have approved it, Solomon finishes. He signs the treaty. The horses arrive within weeks. Magnificent stallions, chariots that gleam like bronze mirrors. Jerusalem becomes a military power overnight. Then the gold starts flowing. Ships return from Ophir carrying treasures beyond imagination. The annual amount reaches 666 talents, 25 tons of pure gold. The number should alarm him. 666. But Solomon is too intoxicated by success to notice the warning sign flashing in the text of his own life. He builds. The temple took 7 years, a masterpiece of devotion. But his palace? 13 years and counting. Marble halls, cedar from Lebanon, gold overlaying everything. Visiting dignitaries gasp at the opulence. Your Majesty, the Egyptian ambassador bows low. Pharaoh offers his daughter's hand in marriage. Think of the alliance, the security for your southern border, the trade advantages, Yes. Solomon doesn't hesitate this time. The wedding is magnificent. Nobody objects. It's brilliant statecraft, they say, political genius. But it opens a door that can never be closed. Within a year, the king of Moab makes the same offer. Then Ammon, then Edom. Each marriage secures peace. Each wife brings her gods, her priests, her rituals. Solomon tells himself he's in control. He's wise enough to manage this. The palace expands. New quarters for new wives. The count reaches 50, then 100. Outside, the construction crews multiply. 150,000 workers hauling stones, cutting timber, building monuments to Solomon's glory. A foreman reports that several Canaanite workers collapsed from exhaustion. Solomon barely listens. They're not slaves, technically, just conscripted labor. Temporary, necessary. His secretary mentions that the temple construction took 7 years, but the palace is entering its 13th year. Solomon waves him away. That night, alone in his study, Solomon catches his reflection in a polished gold shield. For just a moment, he doesn't recognize the man staring back. A servant interrupts. Your Majesty, your 200th wife has arrived. She's brought priests of Chemosh. They're asking where to build the shrine. Solomon opens his mouth to refuse, but he doesn't. King Solomon loved many foreign women, not married, loved. The distinction haunts Solomon as he walks through the endless corridors of the harem. 300 concubines, 700 wives. He can't remember all their names anymore. This stopped being about politics years ago. A trumpet sounds. The Queen of Sheba has arrived. Solomon straightens his robes, forces life into his hollow eyes. She enters with a caravan stretching for miles. Gold, spices, precious stones, and questions. Hard questions about philosophy, astronomy, theology. Solomon answers them all flawlessly. His mind still works like a blade, cutting through complexity with surgical precision. He shows her the temple, its cedar beams, golden furnishings, the Holy of Holies. She gasps. He shows her the palace, the gardens, the administrative system that governs millions. She trembles. The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true, she says, voice breaking. Not even half was told me. But her eyes drift to the harem quarters, to the foreign women watching from gilded windows. And she says nothing about them. Nothing at all. Solomon sees the judgment in her silence. For a moment, he wants to explain. It started as strategy, alliances, peace treaties. But somewhere between wife 50 and wife 500, it became something else, an addiction. A desperate hunt for something, anything, that might fill the void wisdom exposed but couldn't fill. If a Moabite princess doesn't bring joy, maybe an Egyptian will. If northern beauty disappoints, maybe southern will satisfy. If youth leaves him empty, maybe experience holds the answer. He's scientifically testing every possible solution to the human condition. And every experiment fails. The Queen of Sheba leaves at dawn, her caravan laden with Solomon's gifts. Some whisper he tried to add her to his collection too. He doesn't remember. The days blur together now. That evening, his newest wife, a young Ammonite, enters his chamber. She's barely 18, eyes wide with request. My lord, she whispers, my people worship Molech. Could you build a small shrine? Just a high place on the hill, to honor my faith. Solomon knows what Molech demands. Child sacrifice. Infants burned alive in bronze arms, heated red hot. The screams audible for miles. He opens his mouth to refuse, to rage, to explain that he built the temple of the living God, that he knows better, that this is insanity. But then he looks at her face. So young, so hopeful, so temporary, like everything else in his life. How small, he hears himself ask. Within weeks, smoke rises from the hills surrounding Jerusalem. Not the sweet incense of temple worship, something darker. The priests of Chemosh arrive, then Ashtoreth, then Molech. Solomon stands on his balcony, watching altars multiply like tumors around the holy city. The same city where the Ark of the Covenant rests, where the glory of God once descended in cloud and fire. A scream pierces the night. A child's scream, suddenly silenced. Solomon's hands shake. He pours wine but can't drink it. What has he done? But the real question, the one that makes his blood run cold, is simpler. Why can't he stop? Solomon sits in his library at midnight, writing by lamplight. His stylus scratches across parchment, crafting a riddle that will haunt him. The fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. Better is one handful with quietness than 2 hands full of toil and chasing after wind. 3 men, 3 choices, 3 destinies. The lazy man does nothing, folds his hands, starves, accomplishes 0. Israel's enemies, perhaps, the nations that mocked God and crumbled into dust. The peaceful man holds 1 handful with quietness. Enough. Content. At rest. And the workaholic? He fills both hands, grasping, striving, chasing wind that can never be caught. Solomon stares at the words, and a horrifying realization crawls up his spine. He is the 3rd man. He didn't choose wisdom or folly. He chose both. Didn't pick building or pleasure. He pursued everything simultaneously, both hands full, grasping at wind with supernatural intelligence, believing his exceptional mind would somehow extract meaning from meaninglessness. The stylus falls from his trembling fingers. He stands, joints aching. When did he get old? And walks through the palace, past the harem quarters where 300 women sleep, most of whom he can't name, past treasuries overflowing with gold he'll never spend, past architectural marvels that once made his heart soar but now feel like monuments to futility. He stops before a polished bronze mirror in the throne room. The face staring back is a stranger's, weathered, hollow-eyed. The beard is white, the skin sagging. But it's the eyes that shock him, empty as the wind he's been chasing. Where is the 20-year-old who trembled before God and asked only for wisdom? Where is the humble king who judged fairly and built the temple with pure devotion? When did the man who wrote warnings about fools become the fool himself? In much wisdom is much grief, he wrote. But it's worse than that. Wisdom showed him the trap, and he walked into it anyway. Saw the abyss and jumped. Knew better and did worse. He spent his life trying every possible solution to the human condition. Every pleasure, every achievement, every relationship, every experience. Both hands full, grasping at everything, and now, at the end, his hands are empty. A servant rushes in, breathless. "Your Majesty, a prophet has arrived at the gates. He says God has sent him with a message." Solomon's blood turns to ice. He knew this moment would come. God's patience isn't infinite. The high places, the foreign gods, the thousand compromises, judgment was always inevitable. But hearing it announced, actually facing the consequences? What does he want? Solomon's voice cracks. He demands an audience. Tonight, he says. The servant swallows hard. He says, "The kingdom will be torn from your hands." Solomon looks down at his empty palms. The hands that once held supernatural wisdom. The hands that built the temple and signed treaties and embraced 1,000 women. Both hands that chased the wind and caught nothing. The prophet waits outside, and Solomon must finally face what he's become. The prophet stands in the throne room, eyes blazing with righteous fury. Solomon, the wisest man in history, sits frozen, unable to speak. "Because you have done this and have not kept my covenant and my statutes which I commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you and give it to your servant." The words hit like physical blows. Solomon's empire, 40 years of building, diplomacy, achievement, condemned in a single sentence. "Nevertheless," the prophet continues, and Solomon's heart leaps with desperate hope, "I will not do it in your days, for the sake of your father David." The hope dies instantly. Worse than losing everything himself would be watching his son lose it. David's united kingdom, the crown jewel of Israel's history, will shatter because Solomon couldn't control his appetites. "But I will tear it out of the hand of your son." The prophet leaves. Solomon sits alone on his throne, surrounded by gold that suddenly feels like chains. Within months, enemies emerge like vultures sensing death. Hadad the Edomite, neutralized years ago through political marriage, raises an army. Rizon of Syria declares independence. And Jeroboam, Solomon's own construction supervisor, the man who managed the labor forces, meets secretly with the same prophet. 10 tribes, Alki Chaktas. The prophet tells Jeroboam, tearing his new cloak into 12 pieces. God will give you 10 tribes. Solomon's son keeps only 2, for David's sake. Word reaches Solomon. His most trusted administrator, chosen for brilliance and loyalty, will inherit most of his kingdom. The irony is crushing. The empire built by wisdom will be dismantled by a construction foreman. Solomon retreats to his study. He writes furiously, compulsively, trying to make sense of the wreckage. Meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What does man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun? Is this repentance? Some call it confession, the brutal honesty of a man facing his failures. Others point out what's missing. Solomon never tears down the high places, never dismisses his foreign wives, never redistributes his wealth. He documents his emptiness but doesn't reverse his choices. Maybe he's too old. Maybe he's too proud. Maybe he genuinely believes it's too late. The years pass like smoke. Solomon grows weaker, quieter. The palace that once rang with music and laughter becomes a tomb for a living ghost. Then, one morning, he simply doesn't wake. The text is brutally brief. And Solomon slept with his fathers. No heroic last words like David's. No prophetic blessings like Jacob's. Just sleep. Silence. The end. His son Rehoboam takes the throne. Young, arrogant, untested. The northern tribes send a delegation. Your father made our yoke heavy. Lighten the hard service and heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you. Rehoboam consults Solomon's old advisors. They urge mercy, wisdom, gentleness. Instead, he listens to his young friends. Tell them, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. The kingdom explodes. 10 tribes rebel instantly. They crown Jeroboam, the construction supervisor, as their king. Israel splits into 2 nations, Israel in the north, Judah in the south. 40 years to build, 40 days to fracture. Everything Solomon accumulated, gone. Every alliance broken, every compromise wasted. But in his study, hidden among scrolls, lies an unfinished manuscript. Ecclesiastes. 12 chapters of brutal honesty about chasing wind and grasping smoke. And at the end, in different handwriting, someone has added 8 final verses. Someone who understood what Solomon couldn't. Someone with the answer Solomon spent his life searching for. The question remains, who finished Solomon's story? For 12 chapters, you've been listening to a dead man's confession. Solomon's voice, cynical, brilliant, dripping with regret, has walked you through the wreckage of his choices. Then, in the final 8 verses of Ecclesiastes, something shocking happens. The voice changes. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. Wait, stop. Read that again. Solomon didn't write the ending of his own book. Someone else stepped in to finish what the wisest man in history couldn't complete. An unknown narrator seized the pen from Solomon's cold hands and provided the answer Solomon spent his entire life searching for but never found. Who is this mysterious voice? Some scholars suggest Hezekiah's scribes, who compiled Solomon's Proverbs centuries later. Others point to Ezra, writing after the Babylonian exile. Whoever it is, they understood something that eluded Solomon despite all his genius. Life under the sun is meaningless. Solomon was absolutely right about that. But life lived in anticipation of eternity? That's a different equation entirely. Solomon looked at everything horizontally, comparing pleasure against wisdom, achievement against folly, all on the same plane under the sun. The narrator looks vertically, from earth to heaven, from time to judgment, from vapor to substance. Here's what should terrify you. Solomon had every advantage: direct access to God, supernatural wisdom, unlimited resources. He knew exactly what he should do, and he still ruined everything through small compromises that compounded into catastrophe, which means you're not safe either. The image returns. The aging king surrounded by 1,000 wives, drowning in the very thing he thought would satisfy him. But now you see it clearly. It's not a victory photo. It's your warning label. Solomon had everything and learned it was nothing. The question burning in the narrator's final words isn't academic. It's surgical. What will you do differently? Because somewhere right now, you're making your first compromise.